Hello, welcome to this lesson. Now we still continue with 4 for black, dc4, bishop g2, and we already have seen many interesting lines for black. Now in this lesson we're gonna see the move 5 c6. So after knight f3, d5, g3 Catalan, black takes here, and now the move c6. The idea is to prepare b5, but also sometimes he keeps option to play with bishop b4 check. And c6 I think is already a very serious option for black. Lately it became very popular in the last couple of years. Still it's not popular as, for example, a6 or knight c6 or bishop b4 or even c5, but it's kind of popular and it's actually not a bad line. I think it's very close for black to be completely fine in this line, but of course the problem is, like in any other Catalan variations, is that there are many options for white, and still, even in the end of the lines, always black is a little bit suffering. And if white knows what to do, black will still have some problems to equalize. But objectively, I think it's not a bad line. So after c6, white has many options. I'll show you one of them because there are many different and interesting ideas. For example, myself, I played also the move a4 here, which is pretty serious line, and after check, bishop d2, a5, normally the line goes queen c1 or queen c2. It's a very complicated line where black, if black knows everything, probably is very close to equalize, but still it's, I think, a serious line. And after c6, another option, of course, is castle, b5, and this is big theory as well. White has many options, some knight e5, b3, a4, many different lines. But actually after c6 I want to show you the third move, which is also very interesting, is the move knight e5. It's probably a little bit more rare compared to castle and a4, but it's still a very big line, of course, knight e5, very logical, trying to recapture the pawn immediately. So now the best move, it's considered to be bishop b4. This is the main theory. Of course, already b5 is a little bit different, and black has another option, c5, which is very rare, but we will see that actually it's maybe possible as well. So here, for example, if he goes b5, if we go a4, actually this is transposed to the line with 5 b5. In this position b5, knight e5, c6, a4. We already have seen this line that is very dubious for black. So that's why here after c6 we can actually, after knight e5, b5, we can actually transpose to that line by playing a4. But already I believe even knight c6 is not a bad idea. Now the main move is queen b6. Here, attacking the rook, of course, knight d5. This is a very tricky line. If queen a5, bishop d2 is with tempo, and then we are taking the rook. So that's why he needs to block the bishop. We go here, and this is also very nice for white, I believe. e4, castle. We have very nice center. We will develop by some bishop e3, knight c3 maybe. It looks very dubious. But once again, I believe the best is just to go a4 here and to transpose to the other line, which is even better. So b5 is dubious. Another option here is c5. It's very strange because normally here black can go c5 in one move. But now the idea is that already after we committed to knight e5, after c5, this knight can be a problem. For example, if you take on c5, some queen c7 maybe can come, or he can take on d1. And also the difference is that now we cannot go castle because this pawn is hanging already. So basically it makes some sense to play c5 here. Of course it's a little bit suspicious. I think white gain at least a slight advantage, but it's not so easy. We need to know exactly what to do. So for example, here we have some different ideas. I think queen a4 is interesting. Also probably bishop e3 here immediately is also very interesting line. So we're gonna see both of them. I think both are very interesting. I suggest queen a4 for the main line, but bishop e3 is also very interesting for white. So let's see what happens after bishop e3. I think black must go knight d5. This is the whole idea. Now we go castle. And now this is very interesting position. Black needs to do something concrete. For example, if he takes this bishop, obviously this is very dangerous because of this pawn on f7. He must go f6, we take. And this position looks very dangerous for black. For example, if knight c6, we go d5. and our bishop now is very strong. He never can castle. Knight 3 will come next. Black has some problems with his king. Another alternative here after knight takes c4 is to take here, take knight c6, e3, bishop e7. Now we have this check, very important, queen h6, and still we are cutting the king. Still it's very difficult to castle, and white has serious initiative, some knight c3, maybe rook d1, d5. It looks very easy for white, and black spaces are a little bit misplayed, and he still didn't develop properly. So basically taking on e3 is very risky, so after castle he must go knight d7, which is probably fine for black, but it's very complicated and still a bit risky. So we simply take the pawn, b5. If knight e3, this is also good for white. I think we can take with the knight already. Here, and d5, or knight f6 I think is similar. Anyway, we can go d5. So let's say knight b6, d5, he must take. And this is also very pleasant. The bishop is very strong. Knight 3 comes next. This bishop is very passive. There's some weaknesses. It seems that white is slightly better for sure. So after knight takes c4, b5 is the critical. Knight e5 back, knight takes e5. Another option is bishop e7. I think it's possible, but I think white still keeps some advantage. We can just take here. The idea is that if he takes with the bishop, we just take there and trying to take a pawn. If queen d7, this is not enough. He has pair of bishops, but knight c3 is coming next and we have pawn up. So basically after knight d7, he has this intermediate move, but anyway we take, we go here, and we're threatening some knight c3, so maybe he must go here, then we take. And this endgame is far from equal. We just go rook c1, trying to enter. We have some nice square on c5 for our knight. It seems still very unpleasant for black. So that's after bishop d5, maybe d5, but looks a little bit suspicious already to block the bishop. Take, dc5, queen c6, threatening d4, and trying to recapture the pawn. But now we can simply go here, bishop c5. Of course, we don't want to take there because of some d4, and this is pretty dangerous, but here we can simply block the d4 square, and we're threatening to go knight d2 next. It seems very pleasant for white. I mean, according to computers, it's only slight advantage, but practical point of view looks very difficult to play with black. For example, after castle or take, we can simply take. We can just go knight d2, rook c1, some knight to b3 or f3. It looks very pleasant for white. So this is about this bishop b7. So I think the best is to take here and then bishop b7. Now we go a4. We are trying to use that black still didn't develop, so we are trying to somehow open the position. b4 looks very logical to close the position. For example, if he takes immediately, this is still quite unpleasant. We can take here, take there, knight c2. Luckily enough, we have this one. Of course, if he takes the rook, this is very dangerous because we have some ideas like bishop c6 check, and then take here with some rook a7. It looks very, very suspicious. So here he must go knight c2. We simply go here, b3, rook b2, protecting everything for now, and trying to bring this bishop here, king d7, bishop a6. Eventually after bishop c4, some knight d2, it looks a little bit better for white. This is very complicated line, but black needs to be very careful. So after a4, if he goes queen c7, then we can simply take. And this is also kind of close to be equal, but it's not exactly equal. Here, queen e5 is too dangerous because of some b6 maybe, so he needs to go here. Queen a4, queen e4. We are keeping the pawns, we go knight c3. Of course, we have these triple pawns, but also he has some problems with the a7 pawn, and I think white still keeps some pressure. So that's why I think after a4, b4 is the best, probably queen d3. There's some games in this position. The best move is queen c8, with the idea some bishop a6 maybe, or c4. If he goes rook c8, actually this was the game Emre Can Xiu played in Queen Huangdao in China 2019, where white simply went here, rook c1 castle, and now he didn't play the best way, but after knight b3, putting some pressure on this c5 pawn, c4 we take, white is still keeping some advantage because we have pawn up for now, queen a6, just misplaying the rook, queen d3, and then eventually rook d1, Of course, it's close to be equal, but white is pawn up, and still it's just one-sided game. So that's why after queen d3, I think the best defense is queen c8 here, and then queen c7. For example, if rook c1, rook c8 is okay. If knight c4, I think he can go here. Let's say here, take everything, check. It's still very complicated here, g5. Probably black is fine, he wants to take, maybe king g7. Of course, white also have some ideas, but I think the position is approximately equal. So basically this is about after c5, if we go bishop e3, oh, this is pretty forced, and probably black is close to equalize, but still he needs to be very accurate. This is one of the options, but I actually prefer the other one. I prefer queen a4 because it's easier and white really doesn't risk much. So he must go here, and now bishop e3. Now black has to play probably knight d5, I think is the best move. Anything else is just easier for white. If he takes here, we simply take queen c4, and this is just big advantage. For example, if he goes like bishop e7, then we can just take this pawn, castle, knight d7, queen d7. And now we have a couple of different ideas. For example, in the game Rudenko Best Sensu, played by email 2017, white opted for queen c4, here b5, queen c1. We don't want to open the position for now. And black has some compensation for the pawn, but I think white is a little bit better still, so maybe rook c8 now, but still the game goes on and it's not very easy to recapture this pawn. But actually after queen d7, I even like more to play c6 here. Queen c7, here, take, and just to play this endgame. I think it seems very natural. I mean, it seems very good for white. We have this pair of bishops. Of course, he'll go here, but even after the exchanges, eventually we can attack this pawn. I think the bishop can come here, maybe f3, maybe this rook to d2. It looks a little bit more pleasant for sure, and black is still suffering. So this is about bishop e7. So probably the best option here is knight d5, trying to exchange this bishop. Now we take, very important, and knight c3. Now the position is very, very complicated for black. I think black has some problems with the king, with this pawn, and he needs to defend very accurately. For example, if f6, we can simply go back, take. This looks very ugly, castle, even bishop e3, trying to take this pawn back, and it looks very easy and very ugly for black. Another alternative here after knight c3 is to go c takes d4 immediately, then we take. Still we have these very nice pieces. This is attacked, long castle is coming. It looks very nice for white. We have very serious initiative. So that's why here I think the best move is to develop, to give up this pawn, and to castle. But in any case, we are now pawn up, we take, and we have some small advantage. Of course, black is close to equalize because we have opposite colored bishop, maybe he will recapture this pawn, but even if he do that, still we keep some pressure. So for example, a3, just to protect this pawn, queen e7, queen c3, probably bishop f4 is also interesting to provoke g5. If he doesn't play g5, we can go f3, king f2 next. And if he goes g5, we can go here, bishop e6, very nice intermediate move here. Still is very similar to what we are about to see. I think this is not equal. We can go king f2. It's close to be equal, but our bishop is stronger. And we have eventually some h4 ideas, some rook d1 maybe. It looks a little bit better for white. But actually here after queen e7, the easiest is queen c3. This was played by Gelfand against Yakov Geller, played in Moscow 2019. After rook e8, white played differently, but I believe the best is just to go here. Rook d1, intermediate move, threatening mate, he must go here. And even this position, he must go rook d5, otherwise rook d6 maybe will come, so he must go here. And now g4, very typical to block these pawns. Eventually to push h, some rook d1. Maybe he'll prevent it by bishop b3, but then we can just push h4, h5, g5. This rook is not going to anywhere because we are protecting the square. Actually, this position is very playable. I have seen similar positions that were very strong players. They're just pushing and actually even winning eventually. So I think it's not so easy to defend this position for black. And on the other hand, white is not risking much and just enjoying a little bit of advantage. So basically, this is about the c5. It's a bit rare move. There's some There's some games of strong players, but very few, and it looks a little bit strange to play c6 then c5, but in any case white is keeping a bit advantage by playing queen a4, or even this bishop e3 is interesting. So now we're moving to the main move, which is bishop b4 check, and after bishop b4 normally the theory goes bishop d2. This is the main theory here, back e3 and b5, and now black is sacrificing an exchange here, and it seems to be very complicated. I think the theory goes on, and black has compensation, and even objectively I think by very forcing play he's more or less equalizing. So here that's why I want to suggest something a bit rare, which is actually interesting, is to go knight c3 to block this check with the knight, knight d5, and bishop d2. Castle looks interesting, but it's not enough. I think it's only equal after take, take, take. White has nothing special here. If knight c4, he doesn't want to take here because of some bishop a3, but he has this b5 intermediate move. We must go here, take, take. Of course, white has full compensation, but probably nothing else. Some bishop a6 is coming, or knight a6 eventually, or bishop a6, rook c8. It seems that black is very solid. So that's why here white can try bishop a3 immediately, but this looks to me that is forced draw after queen d4, take, is very forcing now, f6, check, here king c7, is very forcing line, check, check. And this is just rook b3 and just leads to some kind of perpetual checks. So that's why this castle, it's nothing special. So that's why I suggest here after knight d5 to actually go bishop d2. And now black has two moves, b5 or knight b6. What I like about this line, this entire line with knight d5 and knight c3, is that there are not so many games. So, I mean, there are some games, but not so many as, for example, bishop d2 here. And still white needs to prove, black needs to prove how to equalize here. It's not so easy. Black has two moves, knight b6 and b5. Personally, I believe b5 is a bit better, but probably both are kind of fine. But in both cases, black needs to be very accurate, and I'll show you some different ideas where white can try. So it's not so simple actually to play in a practical game. So here we'll see both b5 or knight b6. For example, if knight b6, trying to protect the pawn, the idea is, for example, if e3, he simply wants to exchange some pieces. And if knight e4, there are many games with knight e4, black goes here, take, queen e7, here, and this is more or less equalizing. After knight c4, e5, I think black is more or less fine. So what I want to suggest is very rare. There are only a couple of games, actually one my game and a couple of others, which after knight b6, the move is knight f3 going back just to protect the pawn. It looks a little bit strange, but we already provoked this knight b6, and we simply want to continue by castle, queen c2, eventually even some h4 maybe. It looks very interesting, I think, to play like this. So knight bd7 or castle, they're very similar. If he starts with castle, castle, if he goes knight d7 transposes, now he can try something else, for example, bishop e7, queen c2. Now that we have obvious compensation for the pawn, and we just want to play positionally, and I will show you how to play, how to continue in this position. If he goes knight d7, always transpose to the line that we will see a little bit later. And if he goes knight a6, actually this was my game against Sarana, played in Warsaw 2021. I believe it was a blitz game. Actually, I lost that game, but I was kind of slightly better. I played rook a d1, which is very logical. Of course, after knight b4, I wanted to go here. This was the game. And here didn't play very accurate, but I believe maybe a5. The position is still very complicated. But what is interesting that actually here the best move is rook fd1. It's nice improvement. It looks a little bit counterintuitive, because normally you want to go this rook with the idea to keep the queen after the rook. But actually rook fd1 is better, and now queen c1. We want to keep this rook here to protect this pawn eventually, and also we want to bring the bishop to e1. So I think this is the best setup, the rook on d1 and the queen on c1. And black main problem, of course, is this bishop, and his position is very passive. These knights are not doing much, and eventually we'll push some e4 or some knight e4, knight e5. So now how the game can continue, for example, he may go here, knight e4. Now already there are some problems. For example, the next move, it's probably the best for black, but it's very difficult, is the move queen c7, going under bishop f4, which is very strange. But according to the computers, this is the best move. The idea is that he wants to be ready for e5. For example, if we go knight c5, he wants to go e5. And to equalize like this, here, take. And this is more or less fine. Here, we have some initiative, but also he has some counterplay now. Our king is very weak, so I believe black is fine. And after bishop f4, the idea is to simply go back, which is very strange, but actually it's possible. Knight here, knight e5. We don't want to give up this bishop. We want to keep it here. And he's just ready to meet this knight c4 by taking and then e5. And this is, I think, equalizing here. Maybe if bishop f4, black can even go bishop e6. It's very close to be equal now. So this is the whole point of queen c7. It's very strange, of course. It's very difficult to play like this. But even if he plays like this, I think white is keeping some small pressure after playing bishop e1. It's very passive, it looks, but black also doesn't have many plans. For example, here we go a3, we go knight e5, a4. Once again, if we take, this is probably equal, but now we will do something very smart. We just want to wait. Black doesn't have many options. He needs to go here. Eventually, we will bring the rook, and then we will take. And now e5, it will be not the same, so I think white is keeping some small pressure. This position is still very close to be equal, but it's a little bit better. This bishop is kind of passive, so I think white keeps his options. So this is about this bishop e7, knight e6. It's definitely an option, but white still keeps very interesting play. So let's see what happens after knight bd7. We go queen c2 or castle, I think it's the same. Let's say here, castle. Here it must be said that white has some alternatives. For example, for some very active players, I can suggest even this. I think it's very interesting. Although I'm not sure if objectively it's working, but it's still very equal, but white has some options. For example, the idea is after queen e7 to go here, g4, trying to push g5, e5. And now the game is extremely complicated. White can go g5 and this completely crazy position. I think objectively black is fine, but it's also interesting. So for somebody who is very active player, he can try this. But actually I prefer castle. I think it's objectively is better. And also still white keeps some chances to attack the king. For example, queen e7, once again, if here we just go rook fd1, and we continue with the knight a6 line, we continue at some point a4, maybe the knight here, the rook to c1, the bishop can come to e1 or something. It looks still very interesting, because this bishop is very passive, this knight is going nowhere, so it's very difficult for black to develop. So after castle, queen e7 looks logical with the d5. Now we shoot at a3. Of course, he cannot give up the bishop. This is not a good idea. He needs to keep it. This is not a good idea because of knight e4. And eventually after bishop c7, we have this trick, just winning some material. So after a3, he must go bishop a5. Now the bishop is a little bit shaky there. It's not protected. And here we have many options, I think, many interesting moves. But I will show you one of them because, okay, I cannot show everything, but I'll show one of the interesting moves which I think keeps a lot of initiative and very difficult practical problems for black. The move is knight g5, trying to provoke some g6. Obviously, this is not the idea because of knight e4, and it seems very dangerous. The bishop is hanging, this mate is coming. So here he has two options, g6 or f5. If f5, then we can go e4. And now it's very forcing line where I'm not sure if black equalizes. Maybe he can equalize, but it's very difficult. So the idea is that if he goes h6, we just go here. This is very bad already. Black has a lot of weaknesses. And we'll just recapture this pawn. The rook will come to e1. It looks very difficult for black. So after e4, he must go e5, which is very concrete, but it's very difficult. We take. And now if rook e1, knight e5 is very unclear, very sharp. But here we have very nice move, fantastic move, b4. And suddenly black has big problems. If he takes the knight, we can simply go here, take. Eventually we will recapture the bishop, also some knight e6 is coming. It looks close to be just lost. So after take b4, I think he must take here. We go here, king h8 and rook e1. And now the initiative is tremendous. Of course, all our pieces are very active. His pieces are like completely lacking coordination. But still, I think it's kind of possible to defend for black. For example, if knight c5, this is dangerous because of queen a2, keeping the queen on this diagonal. So the best defense is knight e5. It's very difficult to go under this pin, but this is the best move. f4. Now, for example, this is losing because of rook e5. Here, we just take. In g4, very important to keep this pawn. These pawns are very nice, and there's a lot of tension against the king. Some rook d5, some bishop d4. It looks extremely difficult for black to defend here. So that's why after f4, he must go knight bc4 is the best defense. Now we have some options. I believe this is maybe fine for black, but he needs to find 10 only moves. And here we have some alternative. We can go f6 even, very interesting intermediate move. And now the idea is to go here and to take there. And okay, the position is crazy, of course, but probably is equal if black plays all the moves, but still looks very dangerous in a practical game. But also I don't see anything wrong with this. I think it's still very difficult. For example, here we go f6. He must go here. The idea is to meet queen c2 with queen g6, which is only move. Take, rook f4, trying to give mate. You see that the position is crazy. He must take. We go f7, threatening mate in one. Check, take only move. Here only move. c2, trying to create some counterplay. Now, for example, rook e7 is met by king f8, and we must repeat. So here the best try, I think, is e7. Here, bishop h3, c1 is the best. It's crazy. If rook c1, bishop h3 is the idea. So we must go here. Take, king e7. And even this position can be still play. I mean, white can still play. Probably is close to be equal, but okay, this is already move 35, so black needed to find all these moves, and still even here it's like white advantage, probably is draw, but white can still try. So this is about f5. I think after e4 it's very difficult for black. So after knight g5, let's say he goes g6. I think is the best defense, maybe. Rook a1 looks very nice. If knight e4 also looks good, but it's not so clear after f5 here. And then suddenly black also tries to push some pawns. It's very sharp position. I think still in practical point of view it's easier for white, but it's very complicated. So that's why I prefer just to wait for one move to go here. Black has nothing better than e5, he must play this. And then we go bishop e3. And we have very nice compensation. This bishop is completely isolated. And probably he needs to give it up, because otherwise he cannot play with this bishop here. I think bishop c3 is kind of the best move here. For example, h6 is very dangerous because of knight f3. And obviously we're even attacking this pawn. Another dubious move is knight f6. Then we can take. The idea is to go here. Queen c1. Take. It's very forcing. Knight e4. Bishop h3. Knight c5. A lot of initiative, many weaknesses. The king is also very weak. After e5, some knight e6 maybe will come, and it's maybe still defendable, but white has serious initiative and obviously some advantage. So after bishop e3, another option is to take immediately rook d4. I think this is not so bad, but also looks very active for white. Knight f6. For example, what happens after f6? What happens is that b4 is the best move. Take knight h7, and then there are a lot of tricks already. Rook h4 is coming. The only defense is queen f7 now, and now white has brilliant move. That's why I wanted to show you this line. It's amazing move. It's the move knight d5. It's just genius move, computer move. If knight d5, you just take here, we take. And it seems that this endgame is very difficult to defend. Bishop c7, because this is very bad, we can simply take rook d8, pinning the king, the rook, then rook c1 comes, white is winning material. So after rook d5 is very forcing still, he must go here, we go here, rook b5, probably only move bishop b6, take. And now we have two pawns, and the rooks are very active. I think this is clear advantage. I'm not sure if it's winning, but it's a big advantage for sure. So this about f6. Another move is knight f6. We can go here, take. If knight d5, then bishop h6 is very dangerous. If bishop f5, we go here, take h4, still keeping some advantage. He cannot take now because of g5 and this queen is in trouble. And if not, we want to go maybe bishop here or bishop h6. This bishop is out of the game still, and white still white are keeping some pressure for sure. So that's why here after bishop e3 I believe the best is just to give up the bishop already, because otherwise with this bishop is very dangerous. We take with the queen f6. After h6, for example, it's very important to go knight h3, because if knight f3 maybe e4 is unclear, but knight h3 is the best. Keeping some options, attacking this pawn. He must go g5 probably to block the knight. And now we can simply take here. And still white keeps some options. Of course this knight is a bit awkward, but his king is also weak. Some f4 maybe might come, so I think black still should be very careful. And after queen c3, another option is f6. Also logical, we go here, f5. This is the difference between h6, for example. If we go knight e4, now f5 is strong. But after f6, knight e4, f5, we have this move here. And still white keep a lot of initiative. These pawns are too advanced, the king is too weak. Objectively, maybe he can survive, but from a practical point of view, looks very dangerous. And also objectively, white still keeps some pressure. So this is about knight b6. I really enjoy this position after knight f3 and then just playing positional. It seems not so easy for black to play these positions. So after bishop d2, now we're moving to b5. I think it's the best move, but still there are some problems. We'll see that black still needs to solve some problems here. And what I like once again is that there are not so many games here. So after b5 we go castle. I think castle is important. Bishop b7 is worse to start with bishop b7 because we go here knight e4. And now, of course, if he takes, then the problem is that we will have this square for the knight. And if he goes bishop e7, in general this position is very dangerous here. Even knight g4, trying to keep the knight close to the king, f4, with some f5 maybe ideas. It looks extremely dangerous for black. So that's why after castle, I think he must go castle, a4, and the idea is he wants to go with a5, not bishop b7. I think his a5 is more or less the best. If bishop c3, for example, is similar, here if he goes a5, I think probably will transpose to the main line. But if he tries to play f6 immediately, I think we simply go here. And now the idea is that this doesn't work to attack the knight. If he doesn't play e5, we will go e4 next. But if he goes e5, I think this is suspicious. This was the game Mosesov Vov played in Lvov 2019 in Ukraine. White went here, e4, and now he didn't play the best way, but he should have simply gone for knight e5, take here, and after dc bishop c3, this is terrible position. And for example, after knight e3, he could also take on e3, but this is also very nice. The bishops are very strong, and this is very serious trade. So white is much better. So that's why after a4, I think the best is to go a5. And now there's some moves, for example, if e4, knight e7, probably knight b6 also okay. But knight e7 looks interesting, d5 take is very complicated. But I think black is fine. Another option is to take on b5. There are many games here, take, queen b1, bishop d7, or f6, sorry, first here, and then bishop d7. And the position is still sharp, but I think black is okay. So what I want to suggest here after a4, a5 is the move h4. It's very tricky. Unfortunately, there are already a few games, like 2-3 games. I think Arian Tari played this, because I remember this h4 was my intention for already like a couple of years. It was completely novelty. Now it's already 1-2 games, but still I think it's one correspondence game and one game of Tari very recently, which I mean, it's a little bit unfortunate, but still, I think white can keep some pressure, even if black knows this move. So bishop b7, now he has some moves. Bishop b7, f6 is possible. This is the correspondence game choice, and bishop a6 is also kind of interesting. I think probably the best is bishop b7. This is the game of Arian Tari. Also, f6 is kind of possible, and bishop a6, all are very logical. We'll start with bishop a6. This is the move that never been played before. We can start with h5, but black always stops h5 with h6. So I think the best is to play h4. And now we have many retreats. He can go knight here, he can go knight there, he can go knight f6 or knight b6. All of them are very possible. For example, we'll start with, let's say, knight c7, which looks to me a little bit awkward to place the knight there. If bishop f4, bishop d6 is extremely complicated. But I think here the best is h5. We're just playing for attack. We don't care about this pawn. And after he takes it, we go knight g4. And now black's pieces are very awkward. They're very far from the king. We have some ideas with h6. It looks very suspicious. For example, this is simply losing after queen c1, threatening some bishop here or bishop f4 or rook d1. It looks very, very bad. And after, let's say, e5, we go simply here, knight e3, very good move. Maybe bishop g5 also is interesting, but knight e3 is the best with the idea some knight f5, we're just giving up this piece, but queen g4 also, rook d1. For example, this I think is losing by queen g4 and then rook d1. So I think the position is extremely complicated for black. I think maybe he can survive, but in a practical game I'm 100% sure white will just crash here. So this is about knight c7. Another option is knight f6, which is solid. Now we have some alternatives. You can go bishop f4, simply with keeping the pressure. And the knight on f6, it must be said, is a little bit strange, because now never he can play f6, which is his idea. Another option is to provoke h6 and then to go here. And then we have some options by playing g4, g5 or queen c1, bishop takes h6. It's still very defendable for black, but white has serious initiative and very nice compensation for the pawn. Another option is knight e7. Now once again we go here already, and this is very dangerous. If king h8, queen h5, rook d1, white keeps serious initiative. And if he goes queen d4, we go here. For example, queen d8 is already losing by h5, and there's serious attacking possibilities. So queen d7 is the best. The idea is that he wants to meet h5 by e5 to exchange the queens, even though he can give up the pawn, but I think this is the only way. And now we have some options. We can go rook fd1, e5. Here, this is not so clear after queen e8 and f6. But here you can still keep some options, maybe after knight e5, take, knight d7. Here, it's very complicated, attacking both knights, but luckily enough he has this move and bishop c8. It's very sharp, very complicated. But after queen d7, I prefer e5, just to block this idea, to stop this e5, to try to play knight e4. And I think obviously black is not so bad here, but from a practical point of view looks very interesting. We are 2 pawns down, but these pieces are completely stuck. The king is kind of lonely, some knight e4, rook d1, and some h6, and bishop h6, too many options. This is always bad because we can take it, and some knight e5. I think it looks very promising for white. So here after e4, I think the best choice of the computer is knight b6, probably also very human move. But what I don't like about this move is that it's very far from the king, so white still can keep some attacking chances by queen g4. Still is very similar, e5. So this is the same position actually as the previous line, and this is just very playable for white, I think. Of course we are 2 pawns down, but we have a lot of initiative and very nice compensation. Very nice, promising ideas. So this is about bishop a6. I think after e4, white has a lot of compensation. Objectively, always should be defendable, but it's very difficult. So another option, let's see, is f6. This is the correspondence guide choice. This is the game Peiro Apparisi against Bragesioe. Sorry about the pronunciation, but it's very difficult. Played in 2021. So now white went here. Already knight g4 doesn't make sense. I think here is better. Queen e8. It's more or less the only move to protect the pawn. It's the best move, let's say. So now we take here. And in this position we have very good compensation because we have pair of bishops, very nice center pawns. Of course, objectively is fine for black, but we have different options. Rook e1 is what the guy played in the game, but maybe also bishop e4 with some ideas, queen b1, it makes some sense, or some bishop d6 even. So, but rook e1 is good enough, I think. Rook b1, maybe now he can go knight d8 or something, but we have some even h5 ideas, some d5 ideas. I think white still keeps some pressure, and I like very much this kind of positions. We are pawn down, but we have serious initiative. It's like these bishops are very strong, and doesn't seem that we are risking much actually. So this is f6. Bishop b7 is the only human game, let's say, played in this position. So bishop b7 is very logical. The idea is, for example, if e4 he wants to go here, Now the bishop is better here because he wants to go knight d7 next. After h5 already he can go even knight d7. So basically the idea is to go knight d7. So now we must take and e4, knight f6. I think this is not enough to sacrifice the piece because queen b1, and maybe some compensation, but shouldn't be enough. I think white is better. Knight c7 looks awkward. This knight here is very passive. We go rook b1 simply just to prevent some b4. And still we will go like h5, some queen here or the knight there. I mean, okay, it's very playable position. So probably the best is knight f6 because he wants immediately to equalize. He wants to attack this pawn. Queen b1 looks very logical to protect the pawn and to attack the other one. And now black has this b4. Actually, this is the game Tari Lodici played in Terme Cates, I think in the European Championship 2022. So unfortunately, I think this is the best line for black. But in any case, I think white has some options and I will show you how to continue. First, let me see some options. For example, knight c4, it's what Tari played, it's very logical. Now bishop a6. I think this leads to a forced draw here. Take this what Tari did. If rook c5 is also equal, here e5, and this is simply very close to be just completely drawn. So in the game Tari played rook a6, he went for rook d1. If d5, I think black is equalizing by taking. Here knight d4, amazing move. The idea is after bishop d4 to take and to attack the bishop next. So here we can take, but this is also very equal. He takes d5, knight d5, just draw. So after rook a6, he went for rook d1, trying to play for compensation. I don't think black played the best way here, but I think the simplest way is just to take queen b8. Of course, it's good compensation for white because of the pair of bishops, the central pawns. We can maybe keep the queens, like queen c2 or something, but I don't see white winning here. It's very difficult. So after b4, another options are, for example, to take here. Then this is also good for black. Bishop b4, and this is kind of okay, probably is equal. Another option is rook e1, very complicated, b3. And now these pawns are very strong. It's very sharp position. We also have good pawns, but he has some counterplay also there. So I think it's very double-edged position. Probably black is fine and very double-edged. I think white also risks here. So that's why I want to show you one line which I think black equalizes, but he needs to be extremely accurate. So the move is bishop g5. And now this is the first moment where he can go wrong because he has two moves. Both of them are probably fine, but they're very different. I think b3 is the best, but it's already difficult to play b3 after bishop g5 because some knight g4 is coming. And for example, another move is h6, which is very logical. Now we take, he must take with the pawn, because with the queen already we can just recapture this pawn. So he needs to take with the pawn. And now we go here, and this is where everything starts. It's very complicated. Now the best move is b3, but already looks very strange to give up this pawn. If he goes h5, we simply go here, queen d1. And now it's still very sharp, but black also is risking a lot because we are just attacking here. First of all, we always have a draw, but we can also keep going. We can go d5 is the best. And black has some problems. For example, if queen is 7, this is the best. Opening this bishop, he must take now. And we take bishop b4 and maybe f5, some knight f5. I think already is very dangerous. And after d5, if he goes a3, we just go here. a2, bishop h3. These pawns are extremely dangerous, but our attack is also very unpleasant. And don't forget, we always have a draw by giving checks. So it's very suspicious position for black. So that's why I think here the best option is to go b3, but it's already difficult. Knight h6 doesn't lead to anything because we're losing simply a tempo and then he'll push some pawns. So we have some alternatives here. For example, d5, he can go here and this is just a draw. We can make a draw by this. But also after b3, I think we can try a bit more. We can go e5. He must take, he must give up the queen. And this is extremely difficult line for black. I mean, he needs to remember all this. If queen c1, king h7 is okay. So we might go here. And now the best defense is bishop d3. I think it's... because otherwise queen g4 is coming. So this is the only defense. The idea is after queen g4, he still has this move. And h5, some b2, and okay, or some king h7. It's very complicated. Some knight d7, knight f6 maybe. It's extremely complicated. Even this is very difficult to understand why this is okay for black. It's just very computer line. So after bishop d3 we can take the rook, and I'll show you one very funny draw. Is knight d7, take knight d5. Now these pieces are very strong in these pawns also, so we can go f3 here, just to not be a check on e2. Knight d1 is the best rank to play b2, and now he starts to attack the rook, and it seems to be a draw. Very funny draw. So this is about h6, but already looks very dangerous. Another option is b3. So now we have some alternatives. If you take here and take, this is also very unclear. Knight b2. I think it's fine for black, but it's very unclear as well. I mean, maybe knight e6. This also can be tried, I think, in a practical game. If we take immediately, then the difference is he can go a4, and already he can take even with queen. But I think the best try is probably knight g4. Here, only move, e5, take, and now he must find or know this knight e5, which is the only defense probably. And now we simply go here, f3. And this is where I think it's just crazy. He must really know this. Is here black has only one move which equalizes. For example, if a4, this is not enough, we take here to protect the pawn. It's probably not lost, but queen f4, queen h6, it looks very dangerous. These pawns are dangerous, of course, but the king is also very weak, and the knight and the queen is a very nice tandem, so it's very difficult for black here. And after f3, if he goes knight d7, it's probably okay, but we can take, we are blocking these pawns now with the bishop, and I mean, I think white can just continue here forever, and in a practical game, probably it's not so easy to defend. So he has only two pawns, and we sort of block them, so it's not so easy for black as well. But here after f3, the only equalizing move is the move h5, which is amazing. The point is that after we take here, we don't have space for our knight. For example, if we continue the game by rook e1, this is kind of good for black. He's starting to push now, and now with the knights is different. I mean, we can still maybe play bishop c1, but already he has this knight. It's kind of complicated. So probably after h5, the best way is to make a draw already, to take knight g6 and just to make a draw. So you see that this line c6 is serious line, but this knight e5, what I show you, is not the only move. There are many others, and this is a bit rare to play like this with knight c3 and bishop d2. And I think there's a lot of room for black to go wrong in this line. So I really like this line for white. So thank you for watching this lesson. I hope you liked it, you enjoyed it, and see you guys in the next ones. Thank you.